Through my conversations with Premier Davis, I've come to learn how committed he is to the prevention of violence and the safety and well-being of everyone in our province. And I've had the pleasure of working very closely with our Premier as his parliamentary assistant, and I can personally attest just how committed he is to violence prevention for all persons across this province. He is a phenomenal leader in that regard, in all regards certainly, and I'm delighted to be working with him as he leads us on this phase 2. He speaks often of the wonderful work that's being done by our community partners to prevent violence and to make our communities safe places to live, learn, and work. So I'm excited to hear the details of this announcement. Without any further ado, welcome Premier Davis.
However, I come this morning with mixed emotions. One, while we celebrate the next phase of violence prevention for Newfoundland and Labrador, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a few minutes to reflect on what's taken place in our society in this past weekend on Saturday, which is what we saw was a new level of violence, a level of violence that we have not seen before, that we're not accustomed to. We see it on news broadcasts from other centres and other places. We hear it in larger cities and other parts of Canada. We hear this type of violence in other countries such as the United States, but we're really not accustomed to this level of violence in Newfoundland and Labrador. So it is with mixed emotions that I come here today. And this circumstance, while there's still much we don't know about it, and I'm hesitant to speculate, it certainly, what we do know, paints a picture of an individual who was intervening to help a fellow citizen. And Larry Wellman did that. Now, police are here this morning, and I'm not going to put them on the spot, but we often hear the police encourage people that in a violent circumstance, don't intervene. Don't get involved to keep yourself safe. But we also know, we to be honest with ourselves, we also know that quite often that's what we do as people, is that we come to help others. And respond to others when the need arises. And Mr. Wellman did that, and I know that I share with all of you, we extend our condolences to his family. And we've also heard a phrase, I remember an old-time phrase, and many of you know that I spent a full career as a police officer, and I remember a phrase that I think it was Gary Brown used to use it, that evil prevails when good people do nothing. And there's a lot of truth in that as well. There was a lot of truth in that as well. And while what we saw on the weekend I would consider to be a random act of violence, in that the victim was random. The victim wasn't targeted. We also know that there are many directed and targeted acts of violence. And we quite often see that with domestic violence, relationship violence, or intimate partner violence. And this morning, I heard of the story of this lady. We don't know who she is, but I did hear her story, and her story generally, if you haven't heard it, really talked about how programs for government are really geared towards it's quite often geared towards a certain part of our population who may be financially challenged, are lower income, and we have these programs and services to assist them and support them. Excuse me. And our programs quite often are not geared towards people who are seen to have successful lives or successful careers, who live in what some would call a nice home, and they have 2 cars in the driveway and they have responsibilities to take children to school. And we quite often don't focus on, well, what is the case when a person living that type of lifestyle is in an abusive relationship, has been a victim of assaults, threats of violence, and what is available to them and what supports are available to them to leave that relationship. And as a government, we haven't done and focused on those people like we should have. And I know our plan addresses that. and our plan identifies that. But it's a very important point made regarding this case, because when you don't hold control of the bank account, you don't have control of the mortgage payment or the car payment or the finances to buy groceries or to take your children to school, then sometimes your vision and your view may be that there is no alternative, and you'll stay in that type of a relationship. So for this lady that has spoken out publicly, and hats off to her for doing so, she's very right. She's very right. And we have to change the way on how we support people who are living in violent relationships, and we have to improve on the supports to help them get out of those relationships so they can move them and their families and their children to a safer environment. And we have to do that. We have to do that as a province, we have to do that as partners, and we have to lead that as a government. And I know our plan, our new plan, which you're going to hear more about, goes to deal with those types of circumstances. We know since 2006, since the first plan was released, that the people of the province are better aware and do have a stronger understanding of violence and the impacts of violence and a broad range in many ways of how violence impacts people, ordinary, everyday people just like us. So people are understanding more about it. We've put a high focus on domestic violence courts and the benefits of those. And domestic violence court is being established in St. John's, and we look forward to that being opening soon. But I've talked about, in the last year and prior to last year, how violence occurs beyond the boundaries of the jurisdiction of the St. John's Court. And if violence impacts people no matter where they live in Newfoundland and Labrador, no matter how large your community and what resources may be available, or in small, very remote locations, the violence does happen and does take place. And I've talked about the need that we need to find a way to expand the domestic violence court beyond St. John's. So we are in the process of establishing a second court. And that court will be located on the west coast of the province. I believe Stephenville, is the right place for that to be located right now. And my commitment to you is that we are in the process of establishing that second domestic violence court for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. The St. John's Status of Women Council is to be commended as well for the role that they play in our communities. And they have a program, a Safe Harbor Outreach Project, and that has done great work. And I'm glad to advise you that the government is providing $127,000 to support programs and services and to expand the outreach for individuals who are victims of sexual exploitation. This funding will support the St. John's Status of Women Council in their efforts to connect sex trade workers with supports that meet their needs in a respectful manner and a meaningful manner. And we want them to continue in that work. It's valuable work, it's important work, and we want that program to continue. There's been some talk in recent years and discussions inside the House of Assembly and outside regarding the study that was done a number of years ago regarding sex trade workers. And it's an important study and valuable work. And the study that was done that's been talked about is somewhat dated at this point in time. The police have been unwavering in their position that if there are risks that would take place if the report was to be released. So we're going to do a new one. We're going to do a new study, and we're going to complete a new report. And we'll do that with the upfront understanding that the report will be released publicly, so that partners such as you that are represented here in the room, so that the people of St. John's, the people of Newfoundland and Labrador will understand fully the circumstances when it comes to sex trade workers, the risks that are present in their day-to-day lives, the threat of violence that sometimes exists for them, and sometimes on a far too regular basis, and the violence itself. And my commitment to you is that we're going to do a new study, and we're going to release that study. Our terms of reference will be written so that we're able to release that study in whole, so that we are all on the same page and we are all on the same level of understanding, so that together we can tackle the problems, so we can tackle the risks, and we can find a safer future for those that are engaged in sex trades and for all the supports that are around them. And you all know that I'm a full believer in working together in partnership. But if we're not on the same page, it creates a challenge that we're not able to accomplish finding the best way forward. So by doing a new report with full reporting, which is my commitment to you, we'll be on the best page together. I'd also want to, again, reference members of our Aboriginal community. And as the chair of the Council of Federations, which is a group of Canadian premiers I hosted here this past summer here in St. John's, we called upon, and I again here this morning call upon Prime Minister Stephen Harper to convene a national inquiry on missing and murdered Aboriginal women and children. And we've done this a number of times. But it's important to reiterate, especially here in this forum today, that I'm steadfast on the need for a national inquiry. We will not waver on the need for a national inquiry. And I call upon Prime Minister Harper again, the Government of Canada, federal leaders of all stripes, to make that commitment that a national inquiry on missing and murdered Aboriginal women and children will be held and will take place. And the Council of Federation has asked for that. Every premier in Canada agrees with that. Since I became premier last year, I established a Premier's Advisory Council on Crime and Community Safety. Anne Morris, I believe Anne's here this morning. I didn't see her when I came in, but Anne, are you here this morning? There you go. Anne is down here. Good morning, Anne. And Anne has been leading that committee. And I'm looking forward to the report, their first report coming to me, which I understand is coming in the not too distant future. But I'm very pleased to also advise that Anne and the committee have traveled throughout Newfoundland and Labrador and have talked to stakeholders, talked to citizens. They've consulted extensively, and I look forward to their report so that, again, it gives us a greater tool to take action as we talk about crime and community safety throughout Newfoundland and Labrador. And Anne, I look forward to that, and look forward to working with you and your group in the future as well. And thank you for coming this morning, Anne. A great deal has been accomplished since the first strategy was released in 2006, but there's still much more to be done. So much more to be done so that all residents of our province can live, can work, and can learn in environments that are free from violence. And at the base of all of our efforts must be the realization that all forms of violence and abuse are unacceptable. And every one of us bears the responsibility for violence prevention and to work together to find better solutions. So I invite all of you to join with us, join our community partners to take on the challenge of working together for violence-free communities. Because I know together with all of you, we can do better for all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. Thank you for joining us this morning. I look forward to hearing more on this topic.
So good to see so many familiar faces out there and so many people who are so concerned about this issue come together today in anticipation of this plan, but also knowing that you have contributed so much to this plan as well, because it is you that we've listened to in large part, and victims of violence and many other people, but many of the people in this room we've talked to on numerous occasions, and so it's so good to see you here this morning. Premier, as always, it's good to see you. Chief, always, and a willing partner every time that we've called to look for advice or to offer to him some ideas that we've had for some feedback. He's always been with us. And Nicole, this must be a great day for you as well. And in fact, we know it's a big day because you have a big event tonight as well that we're all looking forward to very much. But again, it's the notion that violence is something that everybody has responsibility for. And I think that's what we feel in this room today. This isn't anything that we're doing simply as a government. This is something that the whole community has to do. And so it's absolutely fantastic to see you all here. I'd like to acknowledge as well the Minister of Justice and Public Safety who is here, Minister Darren King. I think he's still here. I saw him earlier. Yes, he's down here in the back hiding away on us. And thank you as well, Minister, for your contributions and your participation here. It's certainly a great day when we get the opportunity to present the second phase of our violence prevention initiative, Working Together for Violence-Free Communities. This is an important day for us as a government and for our community partners, but most especially, it's an important day for victims of violence in this province, because Working Together for Violence-Free Communities is an action plan that draws on their experiences and their advice about how to end the violence in their lives and in their communities. And that really is where we have to start. That really is the first place that we need to go when we try to understand this horrible part of our community and make differences in it. Since Taking Action Against Violence was announced in 2006, we've been evaluating the effectiveness of its actions so that we can fine-tune and build on our successes. An essential component of that evaluation process has been ongoing consultations with victims of violence and service providers who see the impacts of violence every day. This new plan is also informed by our research into prevention strategies and best practices in other jurisdictions, and on the insights gleaned from the 2010 Provincial Survey of Attitudes Towards Violence and Abuse. And that particular survey was a real eye-opener to all of us. Thankfully, in that attitudinal survey, we were able to see improvement. We were able to see that people were understanding violence from different perspectives now and understanding their role, everybody's role in the prevention of violence. So taken together, these consultations and the research have given us a clear understanding of what's required to create a society where Newfoundlanders and Labradorians can live, can learn, and can work in environments which are violence-free. It's really not too much to ask, is it? To live and work and learn in environments that are violence-free. This plan includes a suite of actions aimed at addressing violence against Aboriginal women and children as well. We will continue to work with all levels of government and collaborate with Aboriginal governments and organizations to implement culturally sensitive initiatives designed to improve the lives of Aboriginal women and children. In addition, we will be implementing a new grants program to complement the Aboriginal Women's Violence Prevention Grants. This one will be the Aboriginal Men's Violence Prevention Grants, which will mirror the objectives of the Women's Grants, but with a specific focus on projects that engage men and boys in the prevention of violence. A total of $30,000 will be available annually for that project, and we will be inviting proposals for projects with budgets of up to $10,000 each. Applications for both of those grant programs and the existing Aboriginal Women's Grants Program will open immediately, and more information, of course, is available through the WPO. This action plan allows a multi-layered approach to address sexual violence that ranges from awareness to support for victims. The awareness piece is still key. We have to look at the prevention piece as being one of the key touchstones of what we're doing here. But we also have to recognize that there still are victims of violence, and we have to focus and help those victims as well. There are measures aimed at engaging men and boys in the prevention of sexual violence by raising awareness about the meaning of consent, about dating violence, intimate partner violence, and healthy relationships. We will also work with the 4 regional health authorities to advance the coordination and standardization of the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program and explore the feasibility of establishing sexual assault response teams. Recognizing that all victims of violence need a wide variety of supports and services, this plan includes actions that will ensure victims know where to find the specialized care that they need. We will develop a public information guide to ensure residents are aware of violence prevention and intervention policies and aware also of the programs and the services that are available. We are also committed to increasing the number of safe houses by identifying larger family units within the Newfoundland and Labrador Housing Corporation's social housing portfolio that could be used for this purpose. Building on the principle that everyone bears a responsibility for violence prevention, we will be engaging municipalities, private and public sector employers, unions, and the business community by working with them to develop and support training, awareness, and education initiatives. This plan also includes improvements to research, policies, programs, and services, including implementing a housing-first approach to homelessness and exploring the feasibility of expanding toll-free crisis and information lines to include violence prevention services. The Government of Newfoundland and Labrador recognizes the importance of the work being done at the community level. Much of the implementation of Phase 1 was undertaken through funding to our community partners, and that's really where it needs to be. We need to be in each community, funding community partners to provide valuable information and referral services and to do exclusive and extensive community outreach. We will continue to support and fund these partners, and we will work with them to expand and enhance the work they do to ensure that it addresses the needs most at risk, of those most at risk. Raising awareness of the different forms of violence and their devastating and long-term effects is essential if we are to be effective in our prevention efforts. Without awareness, we can't really move forward very far. So we need to ensure that we raise that awareness. Therefore, we are developing new social marketing campaigns that will include components to address violence against Aboriginal women and children, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons, and the impacts of sexual violence, cyber violence, and social media on children, youth, and families. Ladies and gentlemen, with your support, we must promote a stronger understanding of the impacts of violence and abuse, and we must encourage all residents of the province to become involved in our violence prevention efforts. Our efforts must continue when we leave this room today. I invite everyone to join me in taking action against violence by working together for violence-free communities. Thank you very much.
I'm very pleased to join you here today to launch our province's new action plan for the prevention of violence. In seeking to reduce youth violence under the previous action plan, the RNC developed and implemented the STRIVE program. This program was developed to address the very serious issue of school violence and was recently expanded to include dating violence. In addition, we developed and implemented our computer safety presentation. This presentation was designed to give youth the skills to deal with challenges such as cyberbullying and texting. These programs are provided to all the students in our jurisdiction. The RNC is very proud of these programs and their impact on reducing violence and victimization of our youth. We're very happy to work with all of you in seeing the successes achieved under the previous action plan. We're also very pleased to be invited again to be a partner in the many initiatives in this new plan to prevent and reduce violence in our province. The plan speaks to many initiatives in which the RNC has significant interest, including continued efforts to address internet child exploitation and organized crime through the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit with our valuable partner, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Reducing intimate partner violence and developing strategies to detect and prevent sexual exploitation. Not only are these recognized as priorities in this new action plan, but they are priorities of police services in Newfoundland and Labrador. The RNC is particularly committed to addressing intimate partner violence. We have put in place a risk assessment tool to identify the highest risk cases. Under this violence prevention plan, we'll be increasing our public messaging and working with community partners to improve support for victims. This is all possible because our government has provided the additional police resources and a crime analysis to both police services so that we can work towards improving our response to intimate partner violence. We look forward to working with all of the stakeholders, all of you in this room, towards a safer community, a community where people are safe and feel safe. It is my belief that the plan is a roadmap to reducing violence in our communities. It will help us maintain our current successes while looking forward to the successes of the future. I would like to congratulate Premier Davis, Minister Sullivan, and all of those responsible for the development of our province's new action plan. Thank you.
On behalf of our centre, comprising of our dedicated board and staff, over 55 crisis line volunteers, and thousands of individuals who have connected with us for information and support, we thank the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador and the Violence Prevention Initiative for making us a part of this important launch. And we also wish to recognize the importance of collaborative, strategic, and province-wide planning, and specifically planning that aims to combat and prevent violence in all its forms. And more importantly, we welcome new and innovative opportunities that engage and support essential provincial organizations, regional coalitions, community groups, frontline service providers working to support survivors, empowering communities, and combating violence at its root. As a centre that provides province-wide, survivor-centered supports, we know all too well the costs of violence. Over the past 2 years, our centre's crisis line operations have tripled. Last year, we received over 1,500 calls, 370 of which were crisis-related. We know the needs of our province are complex and have continued to grow. One way in which we're combating and addressing this issue is through our newest CARE project, coordinating Avalon Regional Engagement to support survivors and prevent sexual assailants. And we're pleased to say one of our strategic priorities is developing a pilot project called ASART, Avalon Sexual Assault Response Team, and where we're looking forward very much to working with our government partners and engaging this important strategy. As the needs of survivors and communities continue to increase, we are very pleased that the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador has launched a multi-year strategy, and we anticipate new and innovative investments that will build on a decade previous. Sexual violence and violence in all forms is happening in our communities, and together, and only together, can we make a difference. With new investments into coordinated and community-based strategies, we can put an end to violence in all its forms, and we very much look forward to reviewing the Violence Prevention Initiative's newest action plan and engaging with our government partners on the next steps of collaboration and investment. Thank you very much.